Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special City Council meeting of Sunday, March 24th, 2019. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Here. Danforth?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti? Here. Roby?
Here.
Solem?
Here.
Thorson? Absent. Vilhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
All right, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second? Got a motion from Vilhauer and a second from Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is public comment, and this is the time for anyone to come speak about anything they want. Is there anyone? Please come forward and state your name into the microphone, please.
My name is Ron DeVille. Yeah. Ron DeVille, I live at the lake, lived out there for a long time. My biggest concern is this lake being full in the fall of the year. Nature took good care of that, and we've had problems, but not the problems we're going to have with this. I mean, look at it right now, that lake being full. That lake is a bladder lake. It's nothing more than that. Until you do something with the Sioux River, you're never going to control that water into the lake. So you always want to keep it low in the fall of the year, and we always thought 2 feet down in the fall of the year is about right. And over the years, it seemed to, there's times 76 you could play football out in front of my place. So there's been times when it's been unusual, but that's my big concern. And they spend money on taking care of the around there with rock and all that, but when you get high water, you get ice. Ice takes the shore erosion. You get all these problems with it. The river, you can spend all the money you want on algae control. You're not going to do it with that river open like that. So there's just a lot of things that should be addressed, and it's not doing it. They just talk about the lake, nothing about the river. The river's the problem. You go through Watertown down here, and I was over last fall and behind the Elks. I could walk across that without getting my knees wet. Now, if that's your outlet or your flood control or where the water's supposed to go, then clean it out. In 1969, I wasn't here, and talking to a few people, and they said that Al Glazman and a guy named Jack, I think it's Stoltz or something like that, had a drag lane from Kemp all the way to 3rd Avenue. They dragged that out and hauled that mud away, and they cleaned that up. But everything builds up in there, and that should all be done. Without spending all this money, all this on everything else, consultants and everything else, just get somebody out there that'll get their hands dirty, and that's what needs to be done. So, and again, I say, Mom's 1997 was Mom's house, or my folks' house, is the only time it's been flooded, and it's it's down there where it should be flooded, but now it will be flooded when you keep this lake full like that. So that's my comments. So
Thank you, Mr. DeVille.
So gonna do something.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? See none, we'll move on to item number 3, which is request that the Governor Nome declare a flood emergency for the city of Watertown. And just want to point out, there's no action required here. I wrote a letter to Governor Nome yesterday requesting that she declare a disaster for Watertown because of impending conditions. And I received a call from her office today. That's been done, so that is taken care of. I would like to just give a brief summary of what has transpired this weekend. Councilman Vilhauer?
Can you explain what effect the governor's declaration would or could have, or what will we potentially see from that going forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Be happy to do that. I want to explain how this all came about, and that is part of it. Yesterday morning, or yes, that was just yesterday, Jim Sutton and I, along with Matt Bry of the Department of Transportation, were on a conference call with the National Weather Service. And this was a planned call, somewhat short notice. I mean, we had it on a Saturday morning because there was no time on Friday. Jim Sutton had given an update to the incident command team on Friday afternoon, which was pretty much what we've been seeing all along. We've had a team assembled because conditions in the watershed were right for potential flooding in the spring. So we were watching and looking after things. But Saturday morning, I think, took both Jim and I by surprise. The National Weather Service felt that there was a dramatically increased risk with potential weather that could possibly develop. And after our conference call with the National Weather Service, we had a second conference call with the Army Corps of Engineers and the State Department of Emergency Management. And they pointed out to us that it's not a guarantee, but there's potential for historic water levels on the river, and that action should happen, and we should either do it ourselves or request the assistance of the Corps of Engineers and the State Department of Emergency Management. And they asked me at that time if I wanted assistance. I said I did, and they explained to me what the procedure for assistance would be. And part of that was, it starts big with the state asking the governor to declare a disaster if the weather and conditions are come together, that was a potential. So I wrote that letter, and I also wrote a letter to the State Department of Emergency Management requesting their assistance, and that was received and acknowledged yesterday. And then I wrote a memo to the City Council declaring a flood emergency for the City of Watertown, and also requested that the Cottington County declare a state of flood emergency as well, and requested authorization to sign a cooperative agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And so that action is required tonight, and that will be on the agenda next. There's an actual, I'm asking the council to authorize an agreement with the Corps of Engineers. And after I told the Corps that I did want assistance, it's amazing how fast they responded. Within hours, a sandbagging machine was delivered along with 2 people to help operate it to Watertown. HESCO baskets were ordered and put in the system to be delivered. And we had 3 Army Corps of Engineers personnel here. One of them I see is sitting in the audience, and Tom Curran with the Corps of Engineers. Some of you may remember Tom. He was the point of contact for the City of Watertown during our flood event of 2010, and then again for our flood event in 2011. And so here he is again in 2019. He's very familiar with Watertown. It's reassuring to have a familiar face and someone who's very knowledgeable. He has great expertise, and we're very fortunate to have a man of such stature helping us with this situation. So I'm very confident that we're going to be doing the right thing, and I'm going to ask him to come up when we approve the agreement to explain a little bit about what the scope of work involves and what's happening with that. But anyway, so it's been a busy couple of days, and today the Corps finished up the plans and specs for a scope of work to design and put together improvements to what we have along the creek, which is the Big Sioux River, actually. It is a river, I guess, to protect us from high water in the river if that develops. Now, in 2010, we actually had a higher water situation than we did in 2011. And in 2011, we didn't need the protections at all. And that's what we're hoping for. But nobody can predict the weather. The weather could turn on us. We're expecting very warm temperatures, and that will cause a very quick runoff, and all the water that's in the watershed will come down very quickly. And if it rains on top of it, that will just exacerbate a difficult situation. So we want to be prepared for that. Very little time to get ready for this. So I'm extremely thankful for the Corps of Engineers, who's already arranged for a contractor to come and get us all set up for this. So that's the history. We had to ask for the governor to make her declaration, and that part's done. And so now everything is in order for us to proceed with these advanced measures. The last thing we have to do is sign the agreement. So I'm asking the council to authorize me to sign that agreement. So with that, I will move on to item number 4, and I would like to ask Tom Curran to come up to the microphone, and Heath, if you'll bring up the plans, and we'll talk about what we will be doing. The agreement that we are being asked to sign says that the city of Watertown will, I don't have mine in front of me. Thank you. The city of Watertown is requesting the assistance of the Corps of Engineers, and the government, the Corps, will perform the work described in the scope of work, which Tom's going to describe, made part of the agreement, and the sponsor, the city, will provide without cost to the government all lands, easements, rights of way, relocations, and borrow and dredged or excavated material disposal areas necessary for the work. And the city will hold and save the government free from damages arising from construction, operation, maintenance, repair, replacement, and rehabilitation of the work, except damages due to the fault or negligence of the government or its contractors, and operate and maintain, repair, replace, and rehabilitate the completed work in a manner satisfactory to the government, and remove at no cost to the government all temporary work constructed by the government. Now, pretty much everything in this project that we're doing is temporary work. We're filling in gaps in the levees that we have and that sort of thing. And we're putting barriers where we can't keep them long term. They're short term barriers. So the city will be removing everything after the risk of flooding has passed. But to talk about what we are going to be doing, I would like Tom Curran to tell us about that. You have to push the button on the mic.
Thank you. Okay. As the mayor said, we've been working closely with the National Weather Service, with our engineers down in Omaha. They've indicated that there's a little bit of uncertainty in the forecasting, as there is every year with snow melt runoff, and then you never know when the precipitation, the rainfall is going to come. So right now they're talking about higher than 2010 levels, potentially. Depends on the weather, how warm it gets, how fast it gets, towards the middle to the end of the week. So as the mayor said, she requested our support. I was here in 2010, 2011. We placed some structures during those 2 years. We did a lot of earthen berms along the river, both sides, and also put up the HESCO baskets, which people probably are familiar with, and some sandbags as well. So we're looking at the similar treatments this year. We're not going to do any earthen berm work. That's already been taken care of. We've looked at our modeling, and we think that those levels are high enough to keep the river within the banks and within the berms. We are adding back the HESCO baskets. towards the north end, right downstream, right at 10th Street, there's a few HESCO baskets that are along the street to keep the river from coming back into the trailer court. And then moving downstream, we have by the zoo, there's some more HESCO baskets there, some 4-foot tall baskets in there. That's a pretty low area. We saw a lot of water in there already today. And then the earthen berm downstream of there, that 3B, is staying in place. We're not doing anything there. I don't know if the mayor wanted me to talk about the road closures, but those closures are essentially to keep the water from going back up the street and then coming back into neighborhoods or housing along that roadway. So that would just come across the road to keep the river again within that floodway area. The berm 4A has a little bit of an opening in there where the bike hiking path goes through it. So we'll close that back up. And then downstream of there, there's about 800 feet to close to 1,000 feet of HESCO baskets down to, was that 4th, maybe?
Yes.
4th Street.
Right, yeah, right
Right
there.
in there.
Yes, that's 4th,
Yep.
4th Avenue.
4th Avenue. So, yeah, the HESCO baskets go down there, and then there's some existing earthen berm downstream of there. Right behind then we're not doing anything to that or the other berm on the other side. Those are, according to the modeling, adequate. Down at the lower end there, the 6E and F that are kind of covered up, that's a sandbag levee behind the building. Is that the putt-putt area? There's a sandbag levee to help raise that a foot to 2 feet. And then there would be a closure on Highway 212, plus some HESCO baskets along the south edge of Highway 212 over to Max Hardware. So that would keep, again, the river from jumping the edge of the highway there and then causing a mess towards the north and east. So that's basically what the scope of the work entails. We did have a contractor come and visit the site today, and so they're getting ready to help.
And has a contract been agreed upon with the
We did.
contractor?
We
Okay.
did. We awarded the contract. They're going to start work tomorrow morning.
Okay, and they have 48 hours?
Essentially, we're looking at a peak starting on Wednesday through Friday. Initially, the Weather Service said it was going to be a fairly short peak, but now they revised that, and they're looking at, a couple, 2 or 3 days of a lot of water.
Okay, but the contractor they have a deadline to be done,
Right. We've given him a deadline of noon on Wednesday.
noon on Wednesday. Okay.
Right.
And the contractor will be stockpiling materials at the road crossings, and the city will make those closures at the last minute because we want to keep the roads open to traffic just as long as we can. And when we start to see water coming up high enough, then our own crews will close those up. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Tom? Councilman White?
Well, maybe you might be able to answer this too, Mayor. So currently, just for the public's sake, are there any roads closed in Watertown? Do we expect to see roads closed in 24 hours, 48 hours? Is there anything to share with the public along that line?
I believe if 10th Avenue is really close to breaching. Is that closed, Troy? It's still open. 10th Avenue will probably be the first one that has water over it, and by morning, so we'll put up barricades and ask that people not use that road. The water will be contained, though, to the channel area for the most part. We do have levees to be constructed there, but the water isn't expected to be up to that level for at least a couple of days. So we have a little bit of time there. Yes, Councilman Albertson?
Tom, a question for you. When you talked about the HESCO baskets, we have what's called the McKinley Court down there, the trailer court, from 4th Avenue, and then it goes south toward Highway 212. Will the HESCO baskets be installed? I know you said at 4th Avenue, but will they be installed along the McKinley courts there also?
That's 4B, 4A. Tom? I think
Yeah, no,
part,
can you see the map there,
Well, I can't spot.
Commissioner?
you gotta, it's farther north. There you go.
I'm not familiar with that name or
Okay,
those
it's a
trailer courts.
court right off Highway 20, and it's a real low.
Yep.
Okay, yes, so there will be HESCO baskets between them and the river, yes.
Okay, 'cause that's a real low area right
Yes.
there, and there are a lot of, might be 35 trailers in there.
Right,
So,
yep.
mobile homes.
That'll be placed right along the parking lot.
Okay. I have one other question. I think it's kind of a dumb question now, but it's probably too late to let any water, like Mr. DeVille was asking about the lake being so full. It's probably too late then to try to release any water out of the lake before the water goes into the lake.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. It hasn't there been a study about
I can
doing
talk
that?
about that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The water's entering the lake. The river's higher than the lake right now. So if we open the gates, that would allow water to enter the lake faster. The lake gates can only be operated in strict conformance with the agreement. And the city has no say in changing that. That's set by the State Water Board. And the conditions are designed to mimic the natural conditions and to not alter in any way the natural ordinary high water level at Lake Kampesca. So we can only open the gates under certain conditions. We can only close the gates under certain conditions. It's not foggy or gray. It's clearly black and white when those gates can be opened and closed. And as much as we'd like to drain the lake and provide storage, that's not within our ability to do that. And there is a downstream weir as well that, the older weir is also intact right now. And that's gone for years where it would have blowout sections and the lake would drop very low. And normally when that downstream weir is intact, the lake stays near its full mark unless the groundwater is just exceedingly low. And we don't get any rainfall at all then. But we don't have the ability to manage the lake in a way that we would want. That's controlled by the State Water Board. Councilman Vilhauer?
With water coming into the lake, and it's coming at a pretty rapid pace, I drove around there about 5:30, 6 o'clock. Any comments about what to expect around the lake or with the lake itself? And we're talking about mitigation efforts along the river. Can somebody talk about the lake a little bit?
Do you want to talk about that, Tom?
Other than just in 2011, we did have some forecasted levels for the lake as well. And we haven't done that this year yet, but I can request that and see what we can get and get a forecast. As far as doing anything, never been requested or even if we could. I don't know how you would.
It's a very complicated thing to predict the lake level because it's dependent on the river level, of course. If the river level is higher than the lake level, then the lake will drain out. If the water goes down, and if it's down toward the river, it goes out. If it's up toward the river, water comes in. And we can look at the hydrographs that are predicted, but even those models have a very big challenge to figure out how much of the water will split and go into the lake and how much will go downstream. So we're pretty well guessing what's going to happen at the lake based upon what's happened in the past. And the conditions we think are probably going to be similar to what they were in 2010 or 2011. 2010 was a little higher. But it all depends on how long that peak lasts. If it's a fast peak, it won't be so bad. But a more prolonged peak of the flow rate in the river is bad for the lake as well. So Mother Nature will figure that out for us. Right now, we'll watch the lake and do what we can, but there isn't a whole lot to do. So people should be watching themselves, and if you have a property at the lake, what's the past history has been, and just keep an eye on that. We can tell you what the lake levels are and what the river levels are expected to do. But other than that, it is speculation. Nobody knows. So, Councilman Roby?
A couple of years always get mentioned in these conversations. One was it 2011 was the last really good soaker we had. Then people bring up 1997 a lot. And I know we can't predict this, but I get asked the question, perspective-wise, where are we in contrast to 11 and 07 or 97?
Well, we have less snowpack and less moisture that's estimated to be in the upper watershed. So that's good. But we could get more rain than we got, and we could get more warming more quickly, which would melt the snow faster. So the conditions, according to the National Weather Service, could compound in a bad way for us to result in a flood. And it could be, some of their models show that we would have historic levels in the Big Sioux River at Broadway, and that we had, comparable to what we had in 1997. They're not projecting that up along the other gauges. We have several gauges, some of them closer to Lake Kempeska, and they are not projecting those to be at levels near to 1997. So it's hard to say. Other questions? Councilwoman Manty?
Maybe just briefly to piggyback on to Don's questions, you could also speak a little bit about the changes since 1997 that we've made in the way water moves through Watertown and out, which really has made a big difference.
Yes, thanks, Beth. We have learned from experience. We've done a lot since 1997, and we started building levees right after the flood of 1997, and probably the one big thing that we did that was great is put in all those isolation structures. We've got dozens of isolation structures. Every single storm sewer outlet to the river has a control valve on it so it can be closed. So the river, when it gets high, won't back up into all the neighborhoods like it did in 1997. That was devastating. And the roads were flooded not so much because of rain and water in the small watershed of the town, but that the river was higher than the ground adjacent to it. So we've built levees and we've put isolation structures. Now every one of those isolation structures has a pump, because if you block the outlet to it, the water's just going to back up on the street. So that's what all the pumps, you've seen huge pumps being installed all around next to the river, and there's an intake going into the control structure and pumping the water out into the river over the berms so that the water doesn't back up. And we have to close everything off in order to keep it. It doesn't do any good to have all those levees if you got holes in them every place a road crosses, and or if they're not high enough. So we're building them up a little bit with this process, and the places where we couldn't build a levee, we didn't, but that's where the HESCO baskets come in. And then a HESCO basket is a cube, and it has vertical sides. Berms are sloped, and the berms take up a lot more room. That's why we couldn't put them everywhere. They're very wide. The HESCO baskets can come up the same elevation in a much narrower space, but we need to take those away when we're done. So that's why we do that over and over again. But we have built levees, and we feel fairly confident. This is a much less of a project this year than it was before we had the levees. So that's helpful. Councilman Lallam?
Is there places, can they still get sandbags if there's people at the lake that want to do a preemptive, put them in and things like that? Can they still get them at the street department?
There are sandbags filled at the county extension office.
They can go to the
And
extension office and get those too?
We have infrastructure that we are filling sandbags to protect, and for this project, that's our number one priority. But I think we will achieve that number tomorrow, and then we'll continue making sandbags. Meanwhile, sandbags are available for anybody that wants to fill them on their own, and we have sand piles in 5 different locations. We've got some at the street department, and then we've got some at the sailboat landing and at Jackson Park at the lake, and we've got several other spots. I don't remember offhand where those were, but if someone's interested in doing their own sandbags, you can find on the website, or you can call the city and we can tell you where to go. You have to get your sandbags at the jail or at the emergency management office, the sheriff's office. They aren't at the sites where the sand is, so you pick up your sandbags first and then go get your sand at one of the spots.
They can go out to the extension building though as well.
And I think we are giving, do you know, Troy?
First and foremost, I believe
You have to come up to the microphone.
sorry, just real quick, I believe that first and foremost, the priority was the infrastructure, the city infrastructure, and then once we had ample sandbags available, then we're going to open those up to the public. The outdoor pool was another location
Yeah.
where you can pick up sand as well.
Right.
I know we were out at the extension building. I know Dan was out there earlier too, but they're filling them as fast as they can. We had pretty good public coming out and helping on that. So
They filled 5,000 sandbags in 7 hours today, so it's quite the operation.
That's
And
pretty
it's
amazing.
going on all day tomorrow as well, right?
Yeah, we're going to have 2 shifts out there tomorrow. The first one starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, goes till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The second one begins at 1 in the afternoon and goes till 6. And we're just asking volunteers to contact the Office of Emergency Management at 882-6272 so that they can get registered before they show up.
have we talked to LATI about maybe seeing if their students could come out? And things
Mike
like
Cartney was contacted earlier today, and he did send out a group notification to the staff and the students as well, asking for assistance. So we're looking forward to having some students out there as well helping tomorrow.
that? Yeah, when I was out there was a lot of people out there, which was nice to see. So,
Yeah.
and they moved bags really quickly.
We've had a great turnout today. It was a Sunday. We had a lot of volunteers out there helping. The big thing and the most important thing is that they call that number or get a hold of the Office of Emergency Management so that we can get them checked in prior to sending them out there to help, so we can keep track of how many volunteers we have.
Can you give them that number again?
It's 882-6272. And that's in a lot of the media releases that we're sending out.
Thank you.
You bet.
Officer Troy Van Duzen wears a bunch of hats. He's a member of the police department. He's on the county commission, and he's the public information officer for the incident command team. So he's been very, very busy with this. I want to also point out sump pumps are no longer legal to be dumping into the sanitary sewer. And the reason for that is that our sanitary sewer system is now being surcharged and at risk of backing up into people's basements, and we don't want to do that. If you have a sump pump discharging into the sanitary sewer, get it out now, because when the water levels rise, the sump pumps put out more water, and our sanitary sewers were not designed to handle that clean water flow from the ground. They're only designed to handle the sanitary waste, and you're going to overcome the system with all this snow melt water going into it. So please take your sump pumps out. You can be fined if it's discovered that you're doing that, and it may seem like that would be very hard to figure out who's doing it, but it's not. So the sewer department can figure out who's doing it pretty fast, actually. So please don't do that, and you don't want to back sewage up into your neighbor's floor drain any more than you want sewage backing up into your own floor drain. So please be respectful and take care of that. Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a cooperative agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Have a motion from Councilman Bueller and a second from Councilwoman Manti. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there any old business? Any new business? Sure, thank you. I would like to point out that tomorrow at 5:30, right here in the City Council chambers, there will be a kickoff meeting for housing and economic development downtown market analysis study that Watertown Development Company is doing, and the public is invited to participate in the kickoff meeting and provide input if they'd like. So you're welcome to join in on that if you like. Thanks, Glenn.
Mayor, can I have one
Yes,
comment
Councilman
about new
Danforth.
business? I went out to the gun range yesterday. A lot of activity out there, which is great to see. Has been with the nicer weather. I think it should get looked at as possibly being closed until things dry up a bit and some ice and snow gets melted down. It's very dangerous out there right now with the shooting pads. Are just full of ice. I shot for a little bit yesterday and slipped with a loaded gun. Ooh. And I saw another person because there's so much ice and snow buildup there. The amount of activity taking place out there, the mud, for lack of better terms, on the gravel roadway is very deep, and people are driving onto the new sidewalk areas in order to be able to get out of their vehicles. So it should be considered at a minimum to remove the ice on the shooting pads, or I think it may be in our best interest and everyone's best interest to shut it down for a few weeks in order for that to dry out. And I know we got more pressing issues, but that might be something that we want to do.
Thank you. Yes, if that's a safety concern, I think that's a good idea. Yep. I'll talk with the park department about that. I think that's probably an area to avoid right now, is a gun range with icy, mucky mess. Any other new business or Councilman? Home Rule Charter meeting Tuesday at 5:30 here in City Council chambers, and the Charter Revision Commission is wrapping up, so this is one of the last meetings, might be the last meeting. It's open to the public. Everyone's welcome to come to that. Councilman Lallam?
I'd just like to give a thank you to the city workers, and I know there was Park and Rec and Street and that were out filling sandbags today. There had to have been about 20 of them out there, plus I saw them, fire department and everyone else along the highway trying to get that stuff in place. So just a huge thank you to those guys for coming in. I know Sunday is not the day they probably expected to have to go fill sandbags, but a huge thank you on what they're doing so far.
Yes, they deserve it. Thanks for pointing that out. Appreciate it. Anything else? Are there any liaison reports? We will not be going into executive session tonight, and so I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilman Lallam, second by Councilman Way. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.